On Thursday, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland will deliver her fall economic update, with inflation stubbornly stuck at 40-year highs and with the Bank of Canada continuing to raise interest rates. The country's business groups are watching closely what the federal government's plans are. Joining me now is Perrin Beatty. He's President and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Beatty, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
Okay, let's look first and foremost. What is the Chamber, on behalf of Canadian business, what are you hoping to see in Thursday's economic update?
There's one issue, and that's growth. We need to have a strategy to promote growth. And what the minister needs to do is to set out specific elements of a plan that will enable us to counterbalance what we're looking at the present time, which is a slowdown in the economy and the potential even of a recession next year.
Okay, we are trying to assess, because nobody knows exactly how many substantive measures might be in this update this week. Most of the indications are that the government will be holding off on a lot of the big announcements, obviously, until the spring budget. Are there measures, and you say growth measures, that you feel can't wait?
Well, I don't think the government needs to write all sorts of checks. It does have to respond to measures like the American Inflation Reduction Act, which is drawing investment out of Canada. But aside from that, the focus needs to be on low-cost or no-cost measures that it can take. Regulatory reform would be an example of that. The politicians should be cooling the anti-business rhetoric that drives investment from Canada. Interprovincial barriers to trade would be another. Measures which can help to encourage an increase in the workforce in Canada are also critical, because that'll help to deal with the 1 million jobs that are going begging at the present time. So they should be focusing on things that won't cost a lot of money, but which in fact in some cases could save the government money and will promote growth.
Okay, tax cuts. As you know, in the political arena, there's one official opposition party which is calling for a rollback or a freezing of taxes or new payroll deductions like EI and CPP. And those are payroll deductions that are set to increase. The Chamber's position on that?
I think the most important thing is that there be no new taxes in the budget. We're seeing a lot of business bashing taking place, with people talking about imposing windfall profits taxes on the energy sector or on grocery stores or in other areas. And that simply says to business, you're not wanted here. And it means that investors will take their money elsewhere. We need to hold the line in terms of taxes, and we need to look for other ways of reducing the cost of doing business, such as slashing regulation in Canada.
Okay, when you heard what the Bank of Canada said, the governor last week, and he clearly said that he and the bank are expecting no growth and maybe even negative growth in the economy for at least the next 3 quarters, so at least the next 9 months. What do you make of that in terms of what it's going to do to business?
Well, it's not just the Bank of Canada, but it's every commentator at this point, including the Minister of Finance herself. They're all indicating that it's not going to be an easy year next year. And so what we need is policies that are clearly focused on what do we do to encourage growth in Canada. Everything else is subsidiary to that. And if you look at what the world needs today, for example, the minister gave an excellent speech in Washington a few days ago, where she talked about what it was we could do in Canada to help the democracies be less dependent upon Vladimir Putin. She mentioned accelerating, for example, energy projects in Canada and mining projects. When what the world needs is things like fuel, food, fertilizer, some commodities that Canada has in abundance. This could be Canada's moment. What we need to have at this point is a plan and the political will to make it happen.
Okay, I'm just going to get the last question, just to get the Chamber's, Canadian Chamber of Commerce's position on this. As you've heard over the past few weeks, the refrain in question period has been the Conservative Party, for example, asking for a freezing of any further carbon tax. We are headed into COP27, the UN conference on climate change, starting this coming weekend. The Chamber's position on carbon taxes.
Our highest priority is that we shouldn't be adding extra taxes in addition to what's already in place across the board in Canada, in particular things like windfall profits taxes, and we should be looking at other ways to reduce the cost of doing business in Canada.
Okay, but as for the carbon tax, which has got an escalator, it's going to continue to go up until 2030.
The carbon tax is in place today, and the government needs to look at what are the impacts based on where the economy is at the time of any increase in the carbon tax. And it needs to ask itself, obviously, with the much higher prices that Canadians are paying for energy today, is it necessary to have a further increase at this time? But there are other measures that it can take by holding the line on all other taxes and on reducing other costs of doing business by slashing a regulation and doing away with interprovincial barriers to trade, which could send a very, very positive message.
Okay, Mr. Beatty, thank you very much for taking the time. We'll keep in contact and we'll watch the economic statement on Thursday with interest. Thanks a lot.
We will all be watching with interest.